Tonight I've made a little progress on the Riley. I Last night and tonight I cleaned up the steel brackets that go inside the doors, and I've welded on the little tabs at the top and bottom, which will get screwed into the wooden frame. And what I need to do next is figure out where the hinges actually go and position those. The other thing I need to do on the doors is the back edge and the bottom edge. I need to sort of route a slot in them, or not a slot, a little step, so that I can fit a piece of steel, and that piece of steel is what the bottom of the door and the back edge of the door wrap around. So there's a piece of probably 1.2 mil steel screwed to the timber that overhangs the edge to give me something to wrap these around, and the slots at the bottom there give me the exact measurements for where the hinges go. I have ordered a little, it's like a router table, a little table that you mount your router to. So what I'm hoping is I can use that, mount the router in the vise, and move the wood over the cutting blade, rather than trying to use the router on the doors, if that makes sense. I'll have to see when it arrives if it's actually going to work. So I've done both ends now. And I think that may actually be all of the bracketry I need. Looking at pictures of originals, I think I've got most of them now. And got the fuel tank one in place. It's a good thing because I've actually run out of the 3mm steel strap, so just had enough. So that's kind of where the Riley's at. I did look through my scrap bins. I think I've got spiders, because I've definitely got spiders' webs. But I had a look through my scrap bin. This is a piece of aluminium I bought in the weekend. I thought it was 3mm thick. It turned out to be two of these stuck together. So that's not thick enough to make the little angle pieces there. But going through my scrap bin, I found this, which is 3mm angle, and this is also 3mm. That may be a little bit too narrow. But that'll be the next job, is make up those little the little angle pieces for this front angle. Because that's not 90 degrees, I'm going to bend my own angle. So I have some 3mm flat here, and I'll just bend that down the middle to make it the right sort of shape. And I want to get hold of some aluminium flush rivets, or solid rivets rather. I don't want to use pop rivets because they're not in period, so I just need to find out where I can get some suitable rivets for. I may need to make a rivet set tool. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet, but yeah, small progress, but it's all progress. Back working on the Riley. Put the bike aside for now. I'm looking at mounting the door hinges, and this is actually quite fiddly, trying to get all of this right. So obviously you need, because there's a curve, you need the hinges far enough out so that the hinge pins can be vertically in line. So I've got them clamped to a piece of steel bar, and then you have to figure out how far out do the hinges need to come, so that that vertical line is not inside the curve of the body, if that makes sense. Basically it means the line of the pin has to be this side of the frame, otherwise the door wouldn't open. You also have to make sure these are horizontal relative to the car, so that the door is swinging flat, if that makes sense. If you get the hinges cocked like that, when you open the door, you'd be trying to open the door uphill. Or if it's that way, you'd be it kind of be swinging downwards. It's a bit hard to explain, but you have to basically get these level in relation to the body, and then I have to figure out where I can drill the holes on these hinges to go through, because I'm drilling them through the timber so that it's sandwiched between the timber and the steel. I figure that's the strongest way to make these door hinges. So you have to figure out, well, where do you need to drill the holes in these hinges so that they line up, given everything curves. And it's not just the curve up and down that you have to worry about, it's the curve coming lengthwise with the body as well. So what I mean by that, how can we do this? We stand this up here. If you take a little square and put it on this edge of the door, this face is flat and the back face is flat, but you can see here this has some curve to it. This has a tiny bit, it's not so bad, it's pretty straight. So what I have to make sure then is when I put the screw holes that go all the way through the timber, or the bolt holes, they still end up within the timber. Maybe the easiest way to explain that is if you were to drill through from this side too close to the edge, it'll come out the side here. So I have to make sure where I drill the holes in the hinges makes sense. Plus I want them all to look the same. I don't want to make them different. Plus it has to work on both sides of the door. So I think I've got this pretty close. The other difference that I'm going to do between a real Brooklands and mine, maybe we can see it here and here, and on my door skin, you can see the hinge is actually lower than the timber. So because I want to bolt it all the way through, I'm going to raise the lower hinge up just a little bit. And what I mean by that is my hinges will effectively be set in here, like this. On the original one, they were down here. So I don't know if that means they just literally screwed the hinges into the timber frame. I'm guessing that's how they did it. I've never seen pictures of that. So they must have just had screws, but I want to bolt through. I think that'll be much stronger. Plus give me adjustment, because I can make it so that you can make the holes a little bit oversized on the backing plate, and with a nice flat washer there you can do those up really tight, but it still gives you a little bit of wiggle. So my hinges, instead of being down there, they're going to be up just slightly. So I need to do this side and also make sure it's also going to work on the other side, because the curvature isn't the same, because that pillar is further back. So I think there's actually less curve on this side because it's further back. So I'm going to mark up the hinges, and then the other tricky thing I'm going to need to do is I need to mark up the hinges and then drill through the steel and this. So I think the way to do that is, I know the distance between the hinges, I know where the holes are going to be, I can drill the holes in the hinges, keep the hinges clamped to my bar, mark this piece of steel, drill this out on the drill press so the holes are straight, and then I'm going to make a drilling guide, a block of wood or something, so that I can keep the drill perfectly straight as I go through from this side. So I'm going to screw this down and then drill through, and then hopefully that means my holes are straight coming through here. It's going to be very fiddly. So I've drilled all the hinges, and this is my setup for drilling the holes. I missed a step here, which is where I bolted the hinges to the piece of angle iron. I've made sure they are parallel, and I put this on the car to figure out exactly where those holes needed to be to make sure that this was vertical, as I explained before. And it only just kind of fits. one of the holes up here gets very close to the skin, so hopefully that'll be okay. I did think instead of using individual nuts and washers on the back here, I might actually make a little plate and tap and drill that plate so the 3 screws go through into that plate, and that'll give me a really tight clamping on here, and it'll be a lot easier to assemble as well. But this is how I'm drilling the holes through to make sure the holes are perpendicular to the face. I made a guide block, and it's just a 1/4 inch hole, and I've just got enough room here to get this drill in, even though it's a short drill. And what I can do is I can poke the drill bit all the way through the guide block until it goes into the hole here, and then I've clamped it in place just to make sure nothing moves, and then I can use my drill to drill through. So it's going to take a while because I have to move it for every hole, but there's only 6 per side, so it's not too bad. It's going to be similar when I actually do the doors. I haven't quite figured out how I do the door side, but I want to get the hinges mounted on this side first, and then I can look at the doors. The other thing, of course, I'm going to need to do is notch the body and the door frames so the hinges are inset a little bit. That's going to be interesting as well. I think I'll just have to do that very carefully by hand. I don't think, or I haven't come up with a clever way of doing it with the router, unless I made some sort of jig to guide it somehow. It's probably easier just to do it with a couple of saw cuts down here, and then a chisel, and then a file. For some reason woodworking always makes such a mess. I've got the plate in place, and I did have to open up the holes in the wood just a little bit. I actually had one of the hinges mounted upside down, and because I drilled the holes in them by hand, thinking about it, I probably should have done them on the mill and got them all exactly the same. But there's enough of a little bit of a difference that I had to go to the next size drill bit up to actually get everything to go through and line up. So that's not too bad. And this is that one nut that's very close to the side. So that would actually hit the skin. So I think either a special nut there or a little captive plate. Well, not even captive plate, just a little 6mm steel plate with 3 holes drilled through it for these to thread into. That'll be easier than mucking around with individual nuts and bolts, I guess. And I just have the door clamped to the hinges, but you could see these doors will actually go past 90 degrees if you let them. They usually have there's a little check strap that goes on there to limit the door opening. And I can't close it all the way at the moment because the clamps get in the way, but it will be something like that. But I do still need to recess the hinges first. Now that I've got them bolted in place, I can actually see, I can mark on the timber where I need to make those recesses. And the back of the door is deliberately left. There's quite a bit of width there, just in case I need to adjust it. It should all fit. It is all measured to fit. And I have measured all of the gaps all the way around. I'm pretty sure the panel gaps on this are going to be horrible. They're going to be like 1/4 inch big, but I think that's what they were like. It's a bit hard to tell from the period photos. It's a little tricky to see, but I'll get it as good as I can. So that's coming along. The other thing I will do is mark all the hinges so I know exactly which hinge goes where, and it may not actually be necessarily because I need to, oops, you can see, I need to trim the excess off the end of the hinges. So once those are trimmed, they'll match up to the frame and will only go in one place. But yeah, I think that's going to be a much better way of doing the hinges than just screwing them into the timber. I can't see that lasting, and that helps stiffen up that pillar. So that seems pretty good. Just hinged in place there. Nothing's bolted tight, but there's not a lot of slop in the doors. I imagine after a number of miles everything gets sloppy anyway because everything's going to move, so we'll see. So hopefully the door catches are they're quite long on the latch, so they're like slam catch type things, and I've got double locking ones that will click click, they call them. So hopefully I'll be able to get all of that to work nicely. I've just realized that figuring out the position for the holes in that front door pillar, it's going to be a bit tricky. I think the way I'm going to have to do it is set the door in place, sort of block it up so it's in place, and I'll have to remove one of the screws from here, and then I think I should be able to drill through. So when I drilled these hinges, I did drill them through closed. So I drilled both sides of the flap at once. I put them in the vise and drilled all the way through. So when the hinges are closed, the holes will line up so that when I have this in place and closed, I won't be able to clamp it because the clamps get in the way. So I'm going to have to just sort of block it into place, and then I'll be able to put the drill bit through from this side to get the holes. And I'll have to, it's going to be a real fiddle. I'll have to do them sort of one at a time, I guess. I can't think of any other sensible way I can keep these in place with the door flush with the body or where it needs to be at the correct height and get the holes marked. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So I've got the front half of the other side done, and I did find that one of the holes was in the wrong place. So I had drilled all the hinges in this pattern, and I found out on this side that one would miss. So obviously the curve on this side is more than the other side, not the other way around as I thought. So I ended up re-drilling the hole further inboard, and I actually ended up doing that on the other side as well. I was thinking about, showing you mistakes, but since I never make mistakes, I welded up the holes. So I've welded those up, ground them back, and that all fits a lot better now. There aren't any bolts that are close to the edge of the timber. So it's a bit funny because when you look at them, they don't look straight, but they are. Obviously I tested it out with my barb bolted to it to make sure it actually opens and closes, or both hinges open and close in sequence. The only thing I will have to do is when I make the little notches for the hinges, I will plug the hole in the timber. I'll get a piece of 6mm dowel, or I'll make a piece of 6mm dowel and fill up that hole. The shape, I'm not sure about the shape of this door. The other one seems to fit a lot better. It's just sitting, it's wedged in there at the moment. But it looks like maybe it's twisted a little bit. So I may need to reshape it just a touch. It doesn't seem to be following that bottom contour very well. So the way it works is the bottom edge overlaps. So it doesn't really matter, but I wanted to get it as nice as I can. And I did trim off one side of the hinges. You can see how the other hinge is sort of sticking out at the moment. So that took a while, especially when I had to get the welder out and fix up my non-mistakes. The other thing that arrived yesterday, actually, no, Friday, was the little router table thing. This was just off AliExpress, and it's actually not too bad. It's reasonably solid. It's good enough for doing small little bits and pieces. And I was going to use that to make a little sort of pocket along the edge of the door where I can screw on a piece of steel to wrap the bottom of the door around. But it turns out I can't do that because there's so many curves on that door. I can't get the timber flat against the cutter. So this is really meant for 90-degree bits of timber, but it's not 90 degrees. So I I wasn't able to use this. But I think it'll be okay if I use countersunk screws, because I'm going to be covering everything in steel anyway. It's just steel on steel. I don't think it'll matter that that steel strip is sticking up 1.2 millimeters. The skin will just go over it, if that makes sense. So I think that'll be fine. I do need to paint all of these brackets. I think that is now all of the brackets. Pretty sure. They're surface rusting already. I need to clean those up and paint them. And it's getting close to the time where I can start staining the body. So this has taken me a lot longer than I thought. I do still have to, of course, drill the holes in the frame and figure out exactly how I'm going to do that. If I can just mark the holes, maybe I can make some sort of little gauge or something, or figure out some way to mark it. Because this is flat in this plane, once I've got the hole, I can just drill it straight through. I could do that on the drill press, maybe, somehow, if I hung it over the edge. I just need those holes to be perpendicular. Actually, I could just do it on the bench with another drilling block. When I did the other side, I made a new block just because it was timber. The hole was starting to get a little bit worn out. So I've got plenty of scraps of ash. It was easy enough to drill a hole in another piece of timber. So that's coming along nicely. I did recently buy a couple of things from a local supplier. Luckily, I didn't have to wait to get it from the UK. I had bought more of this bonnet lacing from the UK in my last order. I got some of this stuff, but it's a little bit too thin. It's not as thick as the stuff that I've got around the radiator end, but I found this stuff locally which is thicker. It's the same thickness as this, but it's not impregnated with the resiny stuff or whatever it is this has got. Maybe I could soak it in oil or something, I don't know. But I was thinking, well, I can start thinking about this firewall now. So you have to remember the steel comes along here, wraps down. This will have aluminium on it that wraps over this side. So I need to trim this down so that the height of the aluminium and the height of this and then the height of the bonnet matches the height of this with the steel on it. I think that's right. Basically, this has to be smaller so that the bonnet sits flush with the rest of the body. So that's what that's for. And also from the same place, I got something I don't really need because I've already got one, but it was a bit of a treat. And it should help. I hope it helps with the certification, which I don't know if this will be a problem or not. But I've already got a couple of aero screens that I got ages ago. I was going to use them on my Austin 7, but I don't know where they're from. I don't know what the glass in them is, and the glass is chipped on one of them and starting to come apart on the other. So I got a new one, and the main reason I got it is because these are the English ones. It's got Brooklands cast into it and made in England on the back, and it's got a slightly different mounting system. So that will go on here somewhere. And since realistically this car isn't often going to have passengers, I just got the one. I just prefer the look of them with one. It just kind of makes the car look a bit more like it's a race car, I guess. It's not built for passengers. So that was another nice little thing. And I do like that it says Brooklands on it because that's what the car is. So that works kind of well. And I think that's it. I've just had a big cleanup. So yes, next bit will be mounting making the holes for the door hinges. Yeah, that is going to be interesting, figuring out where to put those holes. But I'm sure it's going to mean taking things apart and putting them back together countless times again. But it's starting to to look right.